Today is March 7th, 2020. My name is Anthony Villanueva. I am interviewing Abir Roman. I'm interviewing for Latino Oral History Project, Voces of the Pandemic at the Center for Latino and Latin American Studies at Northern Illinois Universities. This project is in partnership with the Oral Voces History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. Please know, Mr. Roman, that this interview will be placed in the Northern Illinois University libraries and shared with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. If there is anything that you do not wish to answer or talk about, I will honor your wishes. Because we are not conducting this interview in person, I need to record your consent. So I'll be asking you a series of 6 questions. Please answer yes, I agree, or no, I do not agree after each one. Do you give the Center for Latino and Latin American Studies consent to archive your interview and your materials at the Northern Illinois University libraries?
I do.
Do you grant Northern Illinois University's the right, title, and interest to the copyright over the interview and any materials you provide?
I do.
Do you agree to allow Northern Illinois University libraries to post this interview on the internet where it may be viewed by people around the world?
I do.
Do you grant the Center for Latino and Latin American Studies consent to share your interview and your materials with Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin for the inclusion in the Voices of the Pandemic Oral History mini project, which will include posting this interview on the internet?
I do.
Do you wish for us to share the rest of your interview in your public file available to researchers at Benson?
I do.
On occasion, the Center for Latino and Latin American Studies and Voces Center receive requests from journalists who wish to contact our interview subjects. We will only deal with legitimate news outlets. Do you give consent for us to share your phone numbers and your email with journalists?
I do.
Okay. Gotten through that. So now, Abir, please tell me a little bit about your experiences with COVID.
All right. So when I was stationed in Hawaii in 2019, I remember, I believe it was December 2019, January 2020 timeframe when there was increased discussion and awareness regarding the coronavirus. Due to my location, it's a strategic position for the Marine Corps and the Navy on the island of Oahu. There were concerns for minimizing interaction with the civilian population. There was a intent to minimize interaction so we could minimize the potential for active duty service members on the military installations contracting the virus. So myself as a active duty enlisted healthcare provider, I was a bit more privy to the developments in the earlier months of 2020. There still was a lot of unknowns. However, we were pretty proactive with implementing like standard precautions, face masks and other personal protective equipment in the military health facilities, as well as aboard the base, both Marine Corps Base Hawaii and Pearl Harbor, which is on the other side of the island. we were actually pretty successful in avoiding contact with positive or suspected, I should say, COVID cases, because in those earlier months they did not yet have the PCR type testing available or readily available. So the commander was very adamant about service members minimizing their travel aside from to and from work, or on the base there was a commissary, so supermarket. Those were some of the places that we were permitted to travel. And then for us as healthcare providers or workers in the military, we of course were working longer hours. There was a lot of uncertainty, so we had massive influx of patients, especially those who were switching duty stations, because there's some personnel that have critical skills or jobs that required them to move from, say, Japan to Hawaii from the mainland, the United States, in CONUS, to the island. So there was other measures implemented, which they refer to as restriction of movement. So for a 10 to 14 day time frame, members who arrived on the island, service members rather, and their families were restricted from making movements. So they were only permitted to remain in their hotel room, their transient lodging, or base housing if they had obtained it. So it was interesting because of all the unknowns and all the conflicting reports and developments from the CDC, the WHO, which is what Navy medicine had been taking their guidance from. So I think, I don't think I was very concerned because of my previous experience with the swine flu back in 2009. I was stationed here in California, and I was working with Marine recruits, and I not that I was complacent, but I wasn't as heavily concerned because of the demographic that we deal with, generally healthy or otherwise healthy 17 to 55-year-old males, because I was in an infantry battalion, Marine Corps infantry battalion. I just ensured to educate the patients, the Marines, on proper hygiene measures, as I would do with typical briefs, especially during flu season.
Okay.
So
let me ask you this. Let me ask you this.
Mhm.
You've described some of your responsibilities as a
Mhm.
healthcare provider. For those that will be viewing this interview in the future, why don't you give me a brief summary of your military healthcare career? How long you've been in the service and what your responsibilities are, and how big of a group would you treat at any given time?
Okay.
Why don't you start with when you joined the Navy, and just give me a brief background on your service in the Navy.
Okay. I successfully joined in January 2007, left for boot camp in April of that year. Completed boot camp and then went to Naval Hospital Corps School, which was previously in Great Lakes, Illinois. Graduated from that school and then made my way to Camp Pendleton, California, to work in the former hospital as I waited to go to Field Medical Service School. After that training, I had been sent to Edson Range Weapons Field Training Battalion to care for recruit companies, which typically consisted of, I would say, anywhere from 120, 180 recruits, depending on the season. And I worked there for 2 years, gained a lot of experience with performing what we refer to as sick call. So civilian sector, the equivalent of primary care, family medicine. After there, I requested orders to 1st Marine Division, which was on the same installation, Camp Pendleton, in Southern California. And I did a brief stint with the 1st Combat Engineers. Then I was picked to go on a training team for the Afghan National Security Forces, at which time I underwent some really good training, being immersed in the culture. So language courses, Dari, Pashto, Baluch, communications, vehicles, all the different weapon systems, to include those of Russian origin, which were being used in Operation Enduring Freedom on the part of our foe. But that was also the type of weaponry available to the ANSAF forces. So K-47s, PKMs, Dishkas, RPGs, all those things I was fortunate enough to get trained in, so I could coach the locals that were that had volunteered or were voluntold to.
When you say locals, what locals are you referring to?
The host nation locals, the Afghan Afghan males.
So you were deployed in Afghanistan.
Oh yes, I'm sorry.
How long were you deployed in Afghanistan?
My first deployment, I was there for 6 months, from October 2010 to approximately April, just before April 2011. And I performed a lot of training. We partnered and I trained in combat medicine, what we refer to as combat lifesavers. So in a nutshell, we have a little saying: stop the bleeding, start the breathing, protect the wound, treat for shock. Simple, because a lot of majority of the population there in Helmand province, Afghanistan, are illiterate. Very minimal schooling, formal schooling. So trying to equip them with these skills, because they didn't have the supplies, so to treat gunshot wounds, shrapnel wounds, amputations, what was my focus. So the lack of supplies as well. I was teaching them how to make makeshift tourniquets with their scarves.
All right.
And
so you've been in the Navy, say, for 14 years. That whole enlistment has been in the healthcare industry.
yes.
Healthcare providing. Tell me about your first reaction, your personal reaction to COVID when you learned about COVID. Your personal reaction.
I would say I was concerned for the potential complications that could arise for those with chronic medical conditions among the active duty service members. But on my personal side, some of my family members that have metabolic issues, cardiovascular issues, I had concerns for them because there was a lot of unknowns. So it's very seldom that I get put into a panic. So I think it was more like the reaction was more, I don't want to say robotic, but more like, okay, this is a situation. What are we going to do? What controls can I implement? So it was like an approach to any problem. That's what I would say my reaction was.
So in 2020, in the beginning of 2020, when the pandemic started to expand, did you take any personal precautions during that period?
Yes.
Can you tell me what type of precautions you took?
I minimized my travel. I would remain in a small, I'd say within proximity to the base installation. So work, and then essentials for sustenance. Other than that, I wasn't traveling very much because I didn't want to risk being exposed, which then in turn would expose my patients. So.
And did you have PPE?
No, it wasn't immediately available. At that time, there was nationwide shortages, and being with the Marine Corps, there's minimal funding. So we were making facial coverings from cloth, scarves, neck gaiters. They refer to them as neck gaiters for cold weather. So that's what we were doing. And of course, gloves to minimize,
At what point did your unit start to get resupplied with PPE, or did it never happen?
It didn't happen.
Not
while.
Today, are you well supplied?
Yes.
Do you know of anybody in your family that contracted COVID?
Not to my knowledge.
Do you know of any neighbors that contracted COVID?
Yes, actually, my close friend, he contracted COVID.
Did he survive?
Yes.
Can you tell me about what symptoms he experienced?
I would say the initial symptoms were
did he lose his sense of smell and taste?
yes, that was probably one of the first prominent, or excuse me, now the initial symptoms were that of a URI, nasal congestion, rhinorrhea, sore throat, and then it progressed, I believe, within that week to loss of taste, loss of smell, or rather an altered sense of smell. And shortly thereafter, shortness of breath, and then more general.
Is your friend in the military?
Yes, he's a PA in the Navy.
When you say PA, for those who don't understand that term, what is that?
Physician assistant.
And what did you start doing different? You said that you didn't go out that much, and but did COVID alter your life dramatically?
Yes,
Okay. Did you feel restricted by COVID?
extremely.
Extremely. Do you have any problems interacting with other people when you go out in public?
Yes, I would say because of the fear, people kept distance from each other, which would then translate to minimizing like foot traffic in establishments, so like a supermarket. So that created longer wait times where prior to COVID there were none. People came and went.
Do you experience any people walking without face masks?
Uh, yes, I saw a few people.
Is this in public or on the base?
In public. On the base, the commander was adamant. So the colonel would take punitive measures if someone was not wearing any form of PPE. There was guidance sent out from the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force general down to the 3rd Marine Regiment, and then the respective battalions that I worked with.
And can you tell me about your daughter? Your daughter is how old?
She's 7.
7 years old. Do you know if COVID, where she lives, has affected her education, her movements?
Yes, it affected all aspects of life, bringing it to a halt for a significant period of time.
Has COVID interrupted your education?
It has minimally, since due to the nature of my job and career, I do online school, but there were some delays with funding, for example.
What are your concerns going forward about the healthcare industry and the COVID?
Hmm. I would say first and foremost would be the safety of the vaccine, because of the considerable amount of unknowns that are still lingering.
Have you been vaccinated?
I have not yet.
Are you going to be vaccinated? Or you accept the vaccination?
Yes, as an active duty service member, I am not able to refuse.
And do you have a choice as to which vaccine you'll accept?
No.
Do you know which one the Navy is going to utilize?
Waiting for further guidance, so no.
Okay. You didn't lose any work because of COVID, did you?
No.
You didn't receive any cut in pay?
No.
Has your duty responsibilities been shifted in any way?
Yes. With respect to the mission, we, while still sustaining normal operations, so providing acute medical care to other patients, the focus has been on caring for those who have suspected COVID. So the shortage of healthcare providers in the Navy has, due to numerous factors, deployments and whatnot, there's been an increase in workload.
A question that I'm wondering about is, I know you're stationed ashore, San Diego area. What about the fleet? How has COVID affected those out in the fleet?
In my limited knowledge related to the blue side of the Navy, so the shipboard part of the fleet, they have continued operations to maintain a presence in different areas of responsibility because of our threats, such as China in the Pacific region. As far as like ground forces, so my previous unit, 3rd Battalion, 3rd Marines, they still maintain their deployment cycle with obviously some delays, but they still have managed to remain a forward deployed force in the Pacific region, the Indo-Pacific region.
All right. Abir, is there anything else you'd like to share with me about your experiences with COVID that I didn't ask you about?
Well, I will, well, as an active duty service member, I have to remain, let me say, non-biased. So since I'm not actually physically in uniform right now, I could speak a bit more freely, but still minding some of the words that I'll choose. But I will say this, my concerns with how things were handled are currently being handled. I believe that this virus, which is in, if I'm not mistaken, a similar family to the common cold, but of course with more severe symptoms and more complications. I have a better understanding of the gravity, so I don't take it lightly. However, I do believe there was some politicization of the virus and some of the measures that took place, or excuse me, that some of the measures that were taken, just because the time frame with the election and whatnot. I think what is unfortunate is that a lot of majority of our representatives, whether it's Congress, senators, they choose their own beliefs to they advance their own agendas over choosing to adequately serve the public. So that's something that I've had a hard time digesting, but as active duty service member, I still need to follow the chain of command and not speak against. And I have no problem with that. But I still am a person. So I
understand. That's good. Well, Abir, I don't have any more questions for you. I want to thank you for taking the time out to allow me to interview you.